We are joined via Zoom, the Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, the Neca, Mr. Adewale Smart-Oyerinde. He's joining us. Of course, he's also a member of the 37-man tripartite committee on national minimum wage set by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Yeah, of course. The network seems to be, affecting all of this. But then still, I hope that you're still with us. Walk us through, NECA's first or initial reaction when you got the demand for the proposal by the NLC, of course, with the consultation of TUC on the 615,000 minimum wage.
Well, thank you very much. That's a big question, a big leading question, and this is why I say it's big and leading. As a member of the tripartite committee, there was a process that was established for engagement, terms of engagement for all parties, and one of those terms of engagement was the need for all parties to participate in the public hearing, which in the 6th geographical zone, which was done. Also, part of the terms of engagement was for everybody to participate in the different subcommittees that were formed, which is ongoing. And also part of the terms of engagement was for all parties, labor employers, other stakeholders, to also submit their recommendations to the committee. Employers, we have done, after due consultation, submitted our own recommendation to the committee. So it will be very difficult for us to make specific comment on the figure that was quoted, because the figure is quite strange to us. As a committee member, it's strange because it has not been presented at the committee level. So it is quite a bit, I can say, speculative, which might be dangerous to make specific comments on. I believe Labour too will have submitted his recommendation to the committee, and until we get back to the committee and these figures are presented, then it will be very difficult to make specific comments on it.
Yeah. But in talking about those regional town hall meetings that were initiated across the 6 geopolitical zones, we've seen several figures come out from the southwest, from the northeast, from the various geopolitical zones, with various figures banded. Can you then respond to some of those figures and what the regular procedure is in factoring in the varying figures that we have from the different geopolitical zones vis-a-vis what they think is a fair amount to pay workers as far as compensation is concerned?
Yeah, for what happened at the geographical zones, quite interesting. In one of the geographical zones, we also saw a group of stakeholders also recommending 3 million naira per month as a minimum wage. Now, everybody is free to aspire. We are free to desire. We are free to have expectation, which is not out of place. But for us, and the position we have maintained, the process for setting the national minimum wage, we cannot recreate it based on emotions, based on our personal feeling, or based on our own reality. And I must say also that everybody's realities is valid. If I desire 1 million naira as the minimum wage, it is valid. Nobody can question it. If you demand 3 million as national minimum wage, it is valid. Nobody can question it. But within the context of the framework that established the process, that's ILO Convention 131, we cannot throw away that framework and say we want to operate something that is peculiar to us. Look, it cannot be peculiar to us because the framework for setting it is what we have aligned with, and it is a global best practices, and that is very, very, very important. Convention 131 specifies the process that says we must consider the needs of the workers and their family, we must consider the economy, the state of the economy, we must consider enterprise, sustainability, you must look at other variables like productivity. So all those condiments, if you permit that word, is what will come to play, and we tone down expectations and let us, those parameters will help us to arrive at that real figure that is workable, that is acceptable to all stakeholders, and that is also implementable. So a lot of people have been responding through emotions, this is what we want, this is what we can pay, this is what we can pay. The minimum wage is said, whatever it is arrived at, the SMEs will probably be impacted. So how many SME is making 650, how many SME is making 1 million naira per month? An SME in this country with the proliferation of the multidimensional challenges that organized business is facing. How many SME is making 1 million? Okay, let's say an SME is making 5 million naira per month or 10 million naira per month, and he has 6 or 7 staff or 5 staff. But let's even assume he has 4 staff and is to pay 700,000 or 1 billion and it is minimum wage. Those are part of the issues. It is what we are talking about is minimum wage, not maximum salary or not minimum salary. And if we take a contextual look at what is a wage and a salary, then we start contextualizing all these issues. So there's a lot of misinformation going on, and I think it's very important that we start educating ourselves about what exactly are we talking about when we talk about the minimum wage. Is the minimum amount below which the most vulnerable worker should not earn. So minimum wage is not for you, it's not for her, it's not for me. It's the minimum amount that the most vulnerable worker should not earn.
Okay, Mr. Smart, it's nice of you to think that I don't need minimum wage, but we digress. For most people, right? We should no longer be talking about minimum wage. We're talking about living wage, and as far as this figure is concerned, this is looking more likely like a living wage based on the current economic climate. But can you juxtapose that with what this presents as a counterproductive effort, especially looking at the private sector that is less than thriving in Nigeria? Because it is something that it is akin to just painting everything with one brush, because there can be one minimum wage for the public sector and another minimum wage for the private sector. It costs across board. So what would it look like, especially if we're talking about sustainability of jobs and businesses and economic growth and development? Factor in all of these elements and what Nigerians deserve as a living wage because of the current economic climate. What would the conversation look like?
For the private sector, the private sector has been very responsive. And we must once again, I must use this opportunity to also commend the resilience, the doggedness, the focus, and the empathy that has consistently been shown by the organized private sector. Every business owner in this country, except to run a business, you might not understand what an average business owner, the challenges they go through. Now, for organized businesses, at the industrial sectors, industrial level, different industrial groups exist. Different industrial employers federation and corresponding union at that industry level. And progressively at the private sector level, there's always negotiation that goes on every 2 years, collective bargaining that happens every 2 years. That is beyond the salary increases that comes every year through the instrumentality of performance appraisal. Now, through the collective bargaining instrument, those industrial sectors, they also negotiate the minimum wage in the sector. The employers in the sectors and the union in the sector, they always, every 2 or 3 years, also negotiate the minimum wage in those sectors. So before the national minimum wage will be operational or before it's contextualized, the private sector has taken the lead and have consistently taken the lead. So even as we speak, the minimum wage in most of the sectors in the private sector is even higher than the 30,000, was higher than 18,000 before 5 years ago, and even higher than the current 30,000 that we are paying. So at the private sector, we've been responsive, we've been responsible in meeting the needs and the welfare of employees within the context of affordability. And the workers, they understand it. So at the private sector level, less of a challenge. But within the current situation, the challenges that the workers are facing, for employers, it is double jeopardy. Employers are the ones facing the issue of forex that we earlier faced. We are the ones facing the issue of multiplicity of taxes, as at the last count, over 60 different taxes, levies, and fees that an average business is paying across the 3 tiers of government. We are hoping that the Adewale Smart-Oyerinde committee, the presidential committee on fiscal and tax reform, their recommendation will be approved by the government, so that they can harmonize all these taxes into a single tax or a manageable tax. So all these issues are currently being faced by organized businesses. We talk about the tariffs. Hardly the newly introduced electricity tariffs. Hardly do you find any business not captured in that band A. No. While a counter argument has come that, okay, 22 hours light or 20 hours electricity might significantly reduce the quantum of diesel that a average business consumes on a daily basis, which is a valid argument, a real argument. But we are working on the figures to actually see, look, are the discos currently, or are the GENCOs, are they in a position to generate that kind of power for the discos? And at the discos, at their current infrastructure, is it sufficient enough to distribute and guarantee 20 hours to those industries? So those are the critical issues that we are looking at. So organized business itself is facing this multiplicity of issues and challenges. And
Mr. Smart.
On the long run, the issue of ability to pay and the reality will definitely come into play in arriving at a national minimum wage that is acceptable to all stakeholders.
Okay, I can't help but notice how you segued back to talking about minimum wage when the question I asked ended with how do we get to a living wage, because that's what Nigerians need instead of a minimum wage.
That living wage, and those are part of the issues. If I ask you what is your context of living wage, you will give me a context that is probably different for us. If you ask 100 people now to define living wage within their own context, everybody will give us different definition, perception, and their idea of what a living wage should be. And our position is this: Nigeria, Neca, the unions, we are all responsible constituents of the ILO, that's International Labour Organization. Neca representing Nigerian employers is, NSC representing Nigerian workers is, the Ministry of Labour representing the government is. The ILO is the authority in setting standards when it comes to workplace issues. And the Convention 131 was the first that was set within the context of ensuring that no worker is paid peanuts, which gave us Convention 131. Now, the conversation about living wage is something that the employers, that Neca, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, is a conversation that we support. It is a conversation that the International Organization of Employers, that the global employer body, which Neca is also an affiliate, supports. And sometimes in February this year, the Committee of Experts on Wage Negotiation which I'm fortunately also part of, in Geneva, negotiated with the union, the global union, and at the ILO office, parameters to say, look, we have been hearing of living wage. Living wage is desirable, but we need to create a framework for living wage. For the minimum wage, it is 3 or 4 parameters. You consider the needs of workers and their family. You consider the current economic situation and variable. You consider enterprise sustainability. You consider productivity, among others. Those are for minimum wage. Now, everybody has agreed as at February that, look, let's agree on a parameter that will help us to define what exactly is a living wage. Now, during the governing body meeting of the ILO in March, which I also attended as a member of the governing body, the report of that committee of experts on wage, was adopted by the governing council of the ILO. That, okay, now, all of us have agreed that, yes, there is a need for living wage. But the process of setting the parameter, whether it's going to be another ILO convention, whether it's going to be another ILO recommendation, that will now be applicable generally, globally. That process has just been set up. So, anybody talking about living wage, we're just jumping the gun, and they're basically causing confusion. So, what we have now, and what the tripartite committee was constituted to do, was to negotiate the minimum wage. The 2019 national minimum wage, that act was specific. It was a national minimum wage that this committee was meant to review. So the conversation about living wage, it is desirable. We accept it that it's a path that we should tread. We accept it that it's something we should do, but we must also agree on the framework on how do we measure or how do we calculate a living wage. That is our position, and that is the reality of it. So people need to be enlightened on these issues.
All right, Doctor, let's talk about first of all, you're not only representing Neca, you're part of the 37-member, the tripartite members, of course, committee coming together to discuss all of this. So, as someone who is representing Neca and also part of this committee, listening, you definitely have been listening to, every party's contribution and concerns regarding this minimum wage proposals. What recommendation would you give to the federal government, while waiting for the NLC and the TUC to, of course, put their own proposal forward?
Well, I believe strongly that all social partners must have sent in their recommendation now, and I will also believe strongly at the next meeting of the committee, then the renegotiation about our proposals and reasons for those proposals will probably start. But for government, I think we'll suggest strongly that whatever happens, the pattern of the last few years, government should do whatever it can to make sure it doesn't reoccur. 30,000 was recommended in 2018, effective 2019, but we found many state governments not paying even the 30,000 that was recommended. It was a law. We don't breach the law because for whatever reason. So we are hoping that the federal government will impress it on the state governors that whatever is agreed consensusly at the committee level, that everybody must be bound by it. There shouldn't be any disparity. Everybody must respect that. In fact, it's a disrespect for the tripartite committee. It's a disrespect to the president. It's a disrespect to the law of the land itself for any state government that will refuse to pay the whatever is agreed. But from the body language we've seen, from the conversation we've had at the committee level, everybody seems to be in alignment that, look, there is absolutely need for us to review this 30,000. 30,000 is an embarrassment to a Nigerian worker at this stage, and in view of the many issues that we are facing. But whatever we will agree on must also meet 2 critical parameters, and this is for everybody. One, we cannot afford to set it too low because it will basically perpetuate poverty. That is very fundamental. And also, if it's too low, it reduces the disposable of the household. And it will also affect organized businesses, because the products, the goods and products the organized businesses are producing, they need to be off-taked by the households. So they need some income, good disposable income, to be able to patronize and buy, so that the flow of production and consumption can continue. Now, the second part is this: you can also not afford to set it too high, because setting it too high will also create issues. You'll have set the ground for non-compliance. You'll have set the ground for non-compliance. You'll have set the ground for businesses still probably closing shop or disengaging employees. So many issues that will arise on both issues. So you have to create, and that is the big work of the committee. You have to create a balance, so that it is not too high, it is not too low, but it's something that it is realistic, it is implementable, and it meets the needs of the most vulnerable workers, because those are the people that we are talking about.
I mean, I wanted to ask Mr. Smart, like, if there is a number, but I know because you're part of the committee, you might not really leak out. But then you've answered the question basically with not too high and not too low. He's not going to
give you a number.
Yeah, but it's safe to say he's put Nigerians' mind at rest, saying that this 37-member panel is putting Nigerians at heart and thinking about this. So appreciate that.
That's what we'd love to think. But the last time we ended up with 30,000 naira, and 4 years down the line, it has been overtaken by the economic tide in the country. Well, let's hope, even if we don't get anywhere close to 600, it is quite significant enough to make a difference in the lives of Nigerians. Mr. Adewale Smart-Oyerinde, as always, a pleasure having you join us for this conversation. He's the Director General of the Nigeria Employers, I beg your pardon, Consultative Association. Thank you most kindly for the analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us once again, and do enjoy the rest of the week.
All right. Thank you very much.